in chapter 9, verses 1 to 21. It's a continuation of these angels sounding trumpets. Remember, the Bible wasn't written in chapters, and as these judgments upon the earth unfold, they're like successive waves. They get worse and worse. And if you remember in the beginning, when we began the book of Revelation, I said one of the things we need to do is make every attempt to interpret the things literally. There's times when you can't do that, but this is one of those chapters that needs to be done literally. There's some real difficult parts of this. We're just going to jump into it and take this one by one and do the best we can on it. If you want to follow along, Revelation chapter 9. I'm wondering if I should read the whole thing and come back. No, it's too much. We'll just do it one verse at a time. The fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. Now, there's a lot of people say that this star was another heavenly body. It's not. It tells you what it is. It's a hymn. It's not a meteor, and it's not an asteroid. A star sometimes are referred to as people. Now in Luke 10, Jesus, I think, puts the final stamp on this. Luke 10, Jesus says, he said unto them, I saw Satan as lightning fall from heaven. Satan is an angel of light. And I think that this is not a physical being from outer space, or a body, or a star, or a sun. That this is a person, because it says, unto him was given the key. Now, Revelation 23, that is Revelation chapter 20, verse 3. There is no Revelation 23. That was cast him in. He was casting, the devil was cast into the bottomless pit and shut up. And the seal was put upon him. We need to remember that the only power that the devil has is the power that God allows him to have for God's own purposes. We learned that in the first chapter of Job. When Job appeared, the devil appeared before Job, before God, and he wanted to hurt Job. God gave him a power to hurt his property, but not himself. And when he wanted to go back and he wanted to inflict pain on Job, he had to get permission the second time. And God says, you can give him some illness, but you can't kill him. God won that one in the end, and Job was blessed twice as much in the end. But we need to know that God's in charge of this. He saw the star fall from heaven to the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. The bottomless pit, the word pit there is better translated a tunnel. And we'll talk about that a little farther on down. And verse 2 says, and he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit, as the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. This is like the great volcanic eruption in the 1800s in Krakatoa. It was the ash was so thick it darkened the sun for 2 years. That's already happened once on Earth. This is not hard to do. This is not your average normal pit. This is getting into a level of supernatural destruction that the world has never seen before. Some of this stuff's going to be hard to accept. But the most conservative and reliable commentators have all said the same thing, that this needs to be interpreted literally. This is a literal pit. The sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke. Yes, that means symbolically that Satan darkens men's minds so they can't see the truth and they're obstructed from it. You can say that, but this is literal smoke from a literal pit. At least I believe that those commentators would say that. And they're the ones that, most of the ones that I've read of the 13 commentators I have, these are the ones that are most conservative and reliable. They're not extremists. They don't get off on some wild stuff. There's a lot of wild interpretations about Revelation, what it is and what it isn't. And it's always best to interpret it literally, unless it's impossible. So we have this key. Now, if it was locked, and he was given the key. Who gave him the key? This is God unleashing on earth. Demonic powers you're going to see that have been contained up to now. They're in this pit. There's many references in the Bible to things under the earth, creatures under the earth. And we don't know what's in our earth. You know, we live on a very thin crust of the surface of it. There's billions and billions of cubic miles underneath. And to say that God can't do anything with that is putting a limit on God that we shouldn't do. But we don't know what's down there. Whatever's down there and here has been contained until it's time for this angel to sound. Now this is heavy stuff. Because look what happens in verse 3. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power as the scorpions of the earth have power. And it was commanded them they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. We've seen this before. This is unusual because locusts eat green things. I have a picture, I meant to bring it in the book, of a tree taken 15 minutes apart. And 1 minute it's full of leaves. 15 minutes later, there's not a leaf on it. Locust pants took everything off of it. So they usually do that. But remember, this the seal of God.
We haven't left yet, because the seal of God is on some men.
Well, I'm getting to that here.
Okay.
This, you hear about. The seal of God is on people who are left after the rapture, not on us. I believe these things are happening after we've been raptured. We call it out of the Yeah, we're gone. God's not going to lose this to you and I. I'll go back to the thing with the seal. Others feel otherwise, and I respect. There's a lot of wonderful brothers that feel different than I do, and I still love them. We can, I'll wait for them in heaven if they want to go through this. That's up to them. But Ezekiel 9:4. This is a little review because this thing about a seal goes all the way back to the mark that God put on Cain to separate him, to show him that others wouldn't kill him. In Ezekiel 9, we find another reference to a seal. A seal is a sign of ownership and protection and authenticity. In Ezekiel 9:4, the Lord said unto him, Go through the midst of the city, in the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. For the righteous people who are angry, put a seal on them, set them up as mine. In 2 Timothy 2:19, it says, God has set apart those that are godly for himself. He knows who they are. We already saw in Revelation 7:3, hurt not the earth, God said, neither the sea nor the trees, until we have sealed the servants of God in their foreheads. So he's not going to allow the Christians who have been born, both the 144,000 Jews, and plus people who are saved after the tribulation. The rapture's gone up, and now they realize this whole thing the Christians talking about was true. The plane's left without them. Now what do we do? So these are not for. I believe that with all my heart. I have a lot of reasons in my studies why I believe. It's not because I want to believe. It's not because I'm afraid of going through the tribulation. I'm not. Those three Hebrew children went in the fiery furnace, but Jesus was in there with them. And if I had to go through the tribulation, he goes with me because he said he'd never leave me nor forsake me. He said, though I walk through the fire, the flame shall not kindle upon me. That's his promise to me. I don't care whether I go through tribulation or not. I'm coming out the other side because Christ is with me. But the fact of the matter is, I'm not going through the tribulation, and neither are you. I don't believe it. I have long reasons. Maybe sometimes I'll give you the why I feel that way. Others have other reasons. Anyway, and to them it was given that they should not kill them, but that they should be tormented 5 months. And the torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he striketh a man. Now, locusts have a 5-month cycle. They live for 5 months. There was a plague of locusts in 1950 that went through Saudi Arabia and that area of Asia, and resulted in a complete famine because it destroyed all the crops, killed everything. They could cover the sky for 100 square miles. They're a plague, and they still are. Verse 6, it says, in those days shall men seek death, and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, but death shall flee from them. This is a time of great torment. This is Jesus has said in 1 Thessalonians 1:10, has saved us from the wrath that is to come. And this is the wrath that's coming. Now it's being unleashed. And nobody can say that God didn't tell him. You know, in the book of Psalms, this wonderful, wonderful book, full of so many wonderful things. And yet the very front door to those 150 chapters has the second psalm in it, when God warns those people that they need to draw close to Christ. They need to stick to him. And Psalm 2, kiss the Son lest you be angry. Kiss is a sign of honor on the cheek. People that kind of still, the French do kiss men, even men, on the cheek. It's a perfectly acceptable thing as a sign of respect and honor. But the word kiss in Hebrew, nashak, means to fasten. So it says, honor Christ, but attach yourself to it too. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry, and you perish in the way when his wrath is kindled but a little. Well, his wrath is kindled here. Remember the first 5 words of the book of Revelation, the book of the revelation of Jesus Christ. This book is about Christ. It's not about Apollyon. It's not about the devil. It's not about the Antichrist. It's not about the harlot, Mr. It's about Jesus Christ. Amen. He's in control. He starts in control and he ends in control. And he's in control of these things that are happening now. And that's why I like singing that. He's got the whole world in his hands. Nice to remind that. Verse 7, the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses, prepared to battle, and on their head, as it were crowns like gold. And their faces were as the faces of men. And they had hair as the hair of women. And their teeth were as the teeth of lions. And they had breastplates, as it were breastplates of iron. And the sound of the wings was like the sound of chariots. Many horses ran to battle. And they had tails like scorpions, and they were given stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men 5 months. Now again, locusts have a 5-month lifestyle. Now on these verses here, there's at least 124 different interpretations. And one of them talks about the hordes of Islam that ravaged from 700 AD to the early 1400s. And their horsemen wore yellow, golden turbans. And it makes it a thing that looks like them. That could have been a symbol of what's to come, but that's not what's happening here. These aren't Islamic horsemen. These are demonic beings out of that pit that have been reserved for the day of judgment. At least that's what I believe.
Are they literally going to look like a horse?
Yes, if you ever look at a locust, I was reading up on the locust.
Big locust.
Yeah, but if you look at a locust up close, they look like a horse. And if you look at their face, they have a face like a man. If you look at it up close, nobody ever sees a grasshopper up really close. Grasshoppers aren't quite the same as locusts, but locusts look amazingly like horses. And I have some books at home that have pictures of them. You see why they get this imagery. But these, I believe, from what I've studied, are specially prepared beings that have been contained. And they're released during this time. And they're, verse 11 says they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue his name is Apollyon. That means the destroyer, whether it's in Greek or Hebrew, that which destroys. It says they had a king over them. Proverbs 30 verse 27 says locusts have no king. So much for this being actual locusts. You know, that are the normal locusts. These locusts have a leader. They have a king, somebody who orders where they go and what they do. So this is different than anything the world has seen so far. For people to say this is just like an old-fashioned plague of locusts, like one of the 10 plagues that God brought upon Egypt was a plague of locusts, if you remember. And they did tremendous devastation. This is different than anything that's been seen before. This is a whole new animal. Their sting and their tails. Verse 12 says, one woe is past, and behold, there come 2 woes more hereafter. But remember, everything, our God is a sovereign God. That means he controls everything. He prevents, permits, or promotes, but he controls. Nothing can happen outside of his permission, outside of his control. C.S. Lewis says, if you could find one atom anywhere in the universe, one rogue atom anywhere in the universe that's not under the control of God, then God is not sovereign. But you'll never find that atom. Everything in this enormous, incalculable universe, everything, beyond our ability to even think of part of it, is under the control of Almighty God. Everything. Every cell in your body, every breath you breathe, everything. And he's under control of this. And we need to remember these things as this gets worse. I can't tell you it's going to get worse. And it's getting worse. And it's going to get worse in this chapter here. Matter of fact, a few verses down. Then he says it comes 2 more woes. Verse 13, and the 6th angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar, which is before God, saying to the 6th angel, which had the trumpet, loose the 4 angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. There's an awful lot of stuff in this. I've studied so much in this, you can do the whole night tonight just in these 2 verses. The 6th angel sounded, I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar, which is before God. That indicates again that this is controlled in the altar before God. You know, those 4 horns could symbolize the 4 Gospels. The Gospels are the heart of the Bible. Remember that. Everything that comes before the Gospels is anticipatory. Everything that comes after the Gospels is explanatory. everything before the Gospels comes, telling us that Christ is coming. The Gospels tell us that he came, what he said, and what he did. And starting with the book of Acts to the book of Revelation, it goes back and it expounds upon that. But the Gospel is the heart of it. Whether that's what it means or not, I don't know. But it certainly would fit everything without any exaggeration. He says, loose the 4 angels which are bound in the great river. Are these good angels or bad angels? They have to be bad angels because good angels are not bound. The fact they are loosed tells you that they're loosed from God, that they have been bound. God has no need to bind his own angels. They love him and serve him. And so that's a good picture of this being a demonic thing. Some of the stuff I'm going to share with you tonight is going to be a little hard to swallow because it's getting really supernatural and really spooky. But our God's a supernatural God, and sometimes he's spooky. And if you've ever had any spooky God moments, but yeah, he's cool, but he's God. And he'll put the hair up in the back of your neck sometimes. And the great river Euphrates is so perfect it starts there. It's 1,800 miles long. It's one of the great rivers in the world. It's where everything began. At the basis of that river, I wish I had a big map. I should have brought my maps. At the base of the river is Eridu, where Eden was. The first human being was born in there. The first murder happened there. The law was given there to him. The first law. The ordinance of marriage was given there. The Tower of Babel was built not far from there. Noah built the ark not far from there. The first warfare was fought there. And it's right near where Armageddon is. So here it is in that same area, the same geographical area, where so much of the history of the Bible started in the Euphrates. And it also separates Israel from China and places to the north, enemies to the north, Iran, Iraq, and all of China, if you look at the map, is above there. So there's a lot more to be said about why the Euphrates. Verse 15, and the 4 angels were loosed, was prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year for to slay the third part of men. They had been prepared to destroy that many people. Remember back in Revelation 6:8, 1/4 of the men had already been destroyed on earth. Here, another third. That's over half of the population of planet Earth. We have about 8 billion people. That's 4 billion people. There's 300 million people in the United States of America. When this is loosed, and this isn't just in Euphrates, it starts there. This is a global thing. This is judgment for evil men all over the world. Nobody escapes this. No place to hide from this. That Psalm 2 talks about hiding in the rocks from Christ. You can't do it. You can't hide from this one. 300 million people in the United States of America, 150 million of them would be dead. This is the biggest death this planet has ever seen. And if you run that out, what does that mean? Funeral homes, they're not going to be able to keep up with it. Crematoriums aren't going to keep up. Cemeteries aren't going to be I had 3 funerals on Saturday, and the last night a committal service out there at Corinth Cemetery. I went out and I looked at that little hole in the ground. And those places out there. How fast that would fill up that cemetery. If you had 150 million killed. People pass over, they don't realize what this means. Flesh this out. Remember when the third part of the grass and trees were destroyed. What that does to the oxygen level. When the sun was darkened, it changes light and temperature. Changes agricultural things. These convulsions of God's will are absolutely cataclysmic, like anything that's ever happened before. When that sun was darkened and the third part of the grass, we get our oxygen from the grass family, from trees, photosynthesis. We breathe out carbon dioxide and breathe in oxygen. Have you ever wondered why we haven't run out of oxygen? Because trees produce oxygen under the direct access of photosynthesis and sunlight. You take away the sunlight, it stops that. Take away a third of the trees, you take away a third of our oxygen. Plus you take away a third of the facility to get rid of our carbon dioxide, which is poisonous. So these people who are worried about climate change are idiots. They should be worrying about this. Amen. Climate change is piddly stuff compared to what's happening here. And here, another third. So a third and a quarter is over a half. And God just passes over it. He doesn't elaborate on it. Verse 16, a number of the army of the horsemen, this is 200,000, that's 200 million. 200 million army, and it says horsemen. And now I've heard people say, you heard these descriptions, let's look at them. And I saw the horses, verse 17, and them that sat on them having breastplates of fire, and jacinth and brimstone, and the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions, and out of the mouth issued fire and smoke and brimstone. And by these the third part of the men was killed, and by the smoke and by the brimstone which issued out of their mouths. And their power was in their mouth and in their tails, for their tails were like unto serpents, and they had heads with which to do hurt. Now I've heard people say these are tanks. There's some attempts to squeeze this in. Why don't people just take what God says is what he said? Like, it can't possibly be something supernatural. You have to make it a tank. Well, it could be a tank, but I've studied the development of tanks in warfare, and I've never seen a tank looks like this. They got all kinds of tanks, but no tank looks like this. And it's not likely to be one because they're not putting a lot of emphasis on tanks now. They're putting on planes and missiles and drones and other technological developments in weaponry. But this is a scary thing. Whatever they are, they're frightening. Verse 20, and the rest of the men, but anyway, by the way, let's look at that one scripture in Judges here. Judges, it says, go cry to the gods which you have chosen, let them deliver you in the time of your tribulation. You know, these men, who are they going to call? You know, their gods are money, power, sex, drugs. And you're going to see that. It's right in here. Ambition, pleasure, fame. Those gods aren't going to help them now. Isaiah says the same thing, so does Jeremiah twice. Because look what it says in verse 20. And the rest of the men which were not killed by these plagues, yet repented not of the works of their hands, that they should not worship devils and idols of gold and silver and brass and stone and of wood, which can neither see nor hear nor walk, neither repented they of their murders, nor of their sorceries, nor of their fornication, nor of their thefts. All this and they still with their hands crossed. By the way, sorcery is the Greek word is pharmakia. And we think we have a drug problem now. We've had a drug problem for 6,000 years in this planet. As soon as there were people, drugs were used by people like Nimrod. And the drugs were used to accentuate sexual practices, to numb the pain, to develop certain ecstasies. Pharmakia, this word's been around a long time. You find it in the Old Testament. You find it in Samuel. Drug problems aren't new. There's always been drugs. Just reading about the Canaanite religion in the time of the kings. You know, the Ashtaroth and Baal worship. They used drugs to numb themselves, to excite themselves, to all the incestual things that the abominable perversions that they indulged in Canaanite worship in Judah. And when they gave themselves over to idolatry. So these things have been used for a long time. Nor their fornication. That was the easiest sell. Fornication was part of the worship for Baal, for Ashtoreth, for Moloch, for Chemosh, for every one of those gods. That's an easy sell. You know, the Temple of Diana, they were temple prostitutes. And it was so much in their culture that if you were a married woman, they would force you to do service for a year as a temple prostitute, whether you wanted to or not, at the risk of your family being. That's how devoted they were to sexual licentiousness and sin. And we think that we have a new problem now. It's more because there's 8 billion people doing this now. The population of the world at that time wasn't even 1 million, you know, locally. But these things are still with us, and they're going to stay that way for a while. This is a horrible picture. Now, I know I've done this briefly, and I've just given you what I believe to be I believe this is literal. Just take it what it is. These are horsemen and insects that are locked up in this bottom pit, that have been loosed for this time, prepared by God for judgment. That's literally what it says here. And if I've read the other commentators, I've read 5 or 6 of the other most popular interpretations of what this is, and none of them hold up. You know, the last one I read was the Bible Almanac that was produced a number of years ago by Liberty University. It's a wonderful book. There are wonderful scholars down there, and they have a great love for the Word. But even on 3 sentences, they contradict themselves. One says that this can't possibly be literal, and then at the end it says, but this is actually literal. I thought, did you realize what you just said? You know, 3 times I saw that mistake in print. I mean, I can show it to you. And they were a little confused. I think they were maybe a little afraid just to say this is literal. We want to make God fit in our box. We don't want there to be anything out there that we can't explain somehow. That's why we have anthropomorphisms. We try to reduce God to a man so we can understand him. You know, God made man in his image. Now we're trying to make God in our image. We're trying to make it so we can understand it. I don't understand this. But I accept it as being exactly what it says, because this is what it says. And as I've studied this, and this just hasn't been for this just lesson, but for years. The study in Revelation I did in my church was 3.5 years to go through verse by verse. And the amount of hours and hours of study I did came to the conclusion that it's almost foolish to think of anything other than a literal interpretation. There's only a couple places, we'll get to them, where that's possible, to have a figurative one. But what I come down to is something that St. Augustine wrote. Back in the 7th century, the church was under tremendous attack by liberals. They were teaching that Jesus was not God, that he was not born of a virgin, that there was no such thing as regeneration, no such thing as salvation. Every major of the doctrine of the church was being attacked, and the only person who stood to defend it was Augustine. He had a magnificent intellect, a wonderful story behind him. His mother's name was Monica. She was a godly woman, and she had godly kids except for Augustine. He fathered several children in the area out of wedlock. He was a thief and a drunkard. And the priest says nobody could talk because he was smarter than everybody. He could out-talk anybody. And Monica went to the bishop and said, "Could you please talk to my son?" And she said, "Are you kidding me? No man can talk with him." But he said, "But Monica, you don't need me to talk to your son. With a woman like you praying for him, his salvation is for sure." Well, he was right. It was 16 years after that Augustine came to Christ. But when he came with both feet. And he used his intellect to defend the gospel of Christ, and he did so. He held the church together when it was being torn apart. At the end of his life, he wrote in his journal, and I've always loved what he wrote here. He says, "Everything that I do know about God has taught me to trust him for what I don't know." I feel that way about this. Everything I don't know about the book of Revelation, and that's a lot of stuff, I just trust him. It's all going to work out. You know, he's in control. He's my God. And that's why I picked this thing. He's got the whole world in his hands. I want to try to comfort you a little bit before we went into this Revelation thing, but to assure you that this is your God. And I really believe with all my heart we don't go through this. I believe, because you hear the word church the last time in Revelation 3, the church of Laodiceans. That's the last time you hear the word church until Jesus speaks it in the next to the last verse of the Bible, Revelation 22, to the churches. It's not used again. It's not mentioned again anywhere in here. It's because it's not here. It's gone up. That's why I believe that. So, any thoughts, questions, observations?